The Hilltop is a neighborhood on the west side of Columbus, home to about 67,000 residents. During the 20th century, it was home to many middle-class black families, and it was a very economically prosperous area, but today it's currently very impoverished. Many of the jobs that were there during the 20th century left, and it meant many of the residents today are left unemployed. The Hilltop is bounded by Interstate 70 to the north, a railroad to the east, and Interstate 270 on the south and west. During the time I spent around the Hilltop, I noticed several different positive things that they're doing for the public safety of the area. One of these things I noticed is the addition of public art, things like murals, sculptures all over the neighborhood. This is a mural called "The Light Where She Landed" by Luca Weinberger, who's a resident of the Hilltop area. And I think public art is really important for public safety because, one, it creates a sense of ownership. You know, these walls are clearly owned by someone. The art deters people from putting up vandalism or graffiti. And two, it helps create the character of the area. It makes a really positive vibe when you're walking around. It makes you want to stick around. Another area that I think is really important from a public safety standpoint is Westgate Park, which I think is one of the biggest parks in the Hilltop area. I spent some time walking around there. There was I think it was a children's soccer league game happening, so that was fun to see. I also visited the pond, and it's a big point of pride for the community. They care a lot about maintaining it and maintaining the fish population, so they make sure to stress catch and release. I think this park is just really important for public safety in terms of activity generation, so people can go there, spend time, walk around, play with their kids. As well, I also think that the community pride aspect is really important. People want to take care of the park, make sure nothing bad happens to it, and make sure nothing bad happens there. Another important area for public safety, it's the demolition of Westland Mall. Westland Mall was constructed in 1969 and it was very successful during the 20th century, declined around the 2000s, and was ultimately shuttered in 2011. Stood vacant from 2011 up until this year, actually. And I think ultimately this will be a positive for the area. Prior to its demolition, it was basically just a big vacant building where crimes can happen, people can trespass in the buildings, drug deals may occur in the empty parking lots, things like that. Whereas now that it's demolished, there's some real potential for some development to happen in the area that could be really beneficial for the community, whether that be affordable housing or maybe a grocery store, something like that that could really reinvigorate the area. So in terms of the crime statistics of what's happening in the Hilltop, some of the top crimes that are happening is traffic incidents, theft, motor vehicle theft, assault, and crimes that fit within the other category, whether that be non-criminal or criminal. One thing that did surprise me is actually the time of day that these crimes are happening. I was expecting them to be happening late at night, very early in the morning, but they were actually spiking in the mid to late afternoon. The majority of these crimes were happening on Friday and Saturday, which is something that I wasn't expecting. So this is the route I took on my tour of the Hilltop. I felt generally pretty safe along Broad Street, also in sort of the neighborhood areas. Generally, the places where I felt the least safe was along Sullivan Avenue, which is where a lot of the crime is happening in the area, so that did line up ultimately with the crime statistics. Here are some of the negative CRP principles I noticed around the Hilltop. For one, I noticed there weren't that many activity generators. I know I mentioned Westgate Park, but that seemed to be kind of a special place in the community. There weren't very many restaurants, cafes, places like that where people can go and see their community or hang out with their friends or family. Next, there is gang activity and heavy drug use around the area. You can go out pretty much any time, even during the day, and you may see people on the streets who could potentially be selling drugs or something like that. Finally, I think there's not very much maintenance or management of many of the properties around the hilltop. There's several vacant lots, or even if someone is living in a property, the yard or the house itself may not be properly maintained. Here are some of the ideas I had that could potentially help the hilltop grow and thrive. One, I think that there should be some sort of grant or incentive program to small business owners to open up cafes, restaurants, or stores around the area to help get some activity generators back. Another idea I have is the implementation of community gardens. And I know these aren't always a success when they're put into communities because they can be linked with things like gentrification, but I think when they're done right, they can create a sense of ownership of the green space of the neighborhood. And two, they provide residents with a source of fresh produce. Finally, I would love to see an expansion of the public arts program into schools around the hilltop so kids can learn one artistic expression, but possibly even create a public artwork of their own that could connect them deeper with their community.